Hello everyone, DarkOfAllTrades here. After a little break to indulge in some of my many other trades, I am back and ready to tackle some more points made by apologists. So, what am I checking out today? Apparently, there's this channel called Aim High, who put out a video titled, Atheists Are Afraid of This! The Atheist Dilemma. Well, I am not saying that this fine gentleman here was aiming high when he made this, and I am afraid of things, mostly heights, but I doubt he's going to put me on a ladder or talk about having me ride an elevator to the top of a building, so I think I am pretty safe here. Well, what is he going to talk about? Let's find out.
Now, this is the problem with morality being subjective.
The huge problem with subjective morality, huh? I wonder what exactly is meant here by subjective morality. This idea that atheists think morality is subjective is a straw man fallacy, which tends to be a bit of a talking point in the religious community as an opinion that is used to attempt to dismiss other forms of morality that aren't God-based. It is typically a conflation of the idea that any non-God-based morality is the exact same as arbitrary personal preferences. I don't know a single person who thinks this is actually the case when it comes to making moral assessments. To try to get in front of whatever argument is going to be made here, I'm going to point out that when it comes to morality, we make objective moral assessments in relation to a goal. Religious people do as well. Typically, they think they're using their God as a moral standard, which may be an arbitrary standard just like my goal of well-being of sentient creatures. One could pick anything as the goal and then make objective assessments relative to that goal. The idea of better and worse are relative to the goal set. But we aren't even into the video yet, and I am going on and on, so let's move on.
If morality is subjective, that means that you could basically justify your actions and I cannot say anything about it.
Oh my no, we're only on the first sentence and you could not be more wrong. If you do an action that goes against what I consider morality, then I not only can say something about it, I likely should say something about it. Pointing out harmful actions has a tendency to reduce the amount of harmful actions that people get away with, thereby reducing harm and increasing well-being. The idea that, well, that's just your opinion, is a relevant response to anything about morality is detrimental to the conversation. When it comes to morality, we must first agree on a goal. As stated before, the generally agreed upon goal is well-being. Until we can agree on that, we can't talk about what is moral or not. If you think overall harm is the standard for morality, then we will not agree on whether a specific action is moral or not. And then we don't have a conversation at all. We will just disagree. Fortunately, we build our societies around a shared understanding and agreement on a lot of things, including morality.
We have so much evil in our world, so much chaos, so much heartache, so much things that are happening, so much injustices. But who's to point a finger at who if morality is subjective?
If I grant what you mean by subjective morality here, meaning that each individual determines their own morality, then I can still point a finger at someone else. Again, I can say something is wrong based on my morality. If you disagree, we can take a look at the effects an action has on reality. Is kicking puppies moral or immoral? I argue that it reduces well-being, making it immoral. Enough people agree with that assessment, so we, as a whole, determine that that action is immoral and make rules against it. You are free to violate that rule, but you are not free from the consequences that we, as a society, agree to put on you.
Many critics of the Bible, many critics of God, many who oppose the existence of God, point to this idea that morality has to be subjective. But the problem with that is that you cannot hold anybody accountable if morality is subjective.
Why not? If enough people in a society thinks that kicking puppies is wrong and you kick a puppy, that society can hold you accountable through things like fines, imprisonment, or other penalties. People set rules for their societies, and when someone violates those rules, the society holds that person accountable for their actions. Whether you agree with their assessment or not is irrelevant.
If I'm in the wrong, according to you, I may be in the right according to me. I could go down a list of names of many who have existed in the past, who exist today who are of high ranking, who are in power, who are exercising what seems moral to them, yet at the same time, perhaps from your vantage point or my vantage point and what we believe is moral and upright, their form of morality may be our form or is our form of injustice. But if morality is subjective, on what grounds could I basically seek justice out? At what grounds could I actually point a finger and basically say that that individual or that society or that group or that nation needs to be held accountable? And that is the great dilemma. That is the great issue.
On your own moral grounds, you can say that blasphemy against your God is immoral and that anyone who says anything negative about your God should be held accountable. When asked on what grounds, you can point to your own beliefs. In some places, you can point to the law to actually hold people accountable with more than just that. According to Pew Research, 40% of all countries and territories have some form of blasphemy laws. I quote, "In some countries, such as Afghanistan, Brunei, Iran, Mauritania, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia, violations of blasphemy laws can carry the possibility of the death penalty." Source for this is in the description. You can say that someone needs to be held accountable for blasphemy, and I can say that they don't need to be held accountable. I can say that you should be held accountable for kicking a puppy, and you can say that you shouldn't be. Whether you should or shouldn't is dependent on the goal to which we've agreed and the objective assessment of the action in relation to that goal. But let me take it a step further for you. Let's pretend that you are 100% right. It is just my opinion that someone who kicks a puppy should be held accountable. You think differently. How is society as a whole affected? Is well-being generally improved by the outcome where you are held accountable, or is it generally improved when you're not held accountable? In what you actually believe, you run dangerously close to an appeal to emotion fallacy here. You feel like someone should be held accountable, therefore they are? What happens if a serial puppy kicker doesn't ever get caught? You want them to face some sort of judgment, so they do? Based on what? What grounds do you base your belief in some sort of ultimate justice?
But I understand, I know now, I know why many atheists, skeptics do not hold to objective morality. What I find is that unless science could basically test it, unless science could actually measure it, I find that many skeptics, many atheists stay away from certain topics until proven true.
I'm not sure what you mean by this yet. I stay away from topics that don't interest me. I also tend to stay away from topics on which I don't have enough education. I can give you the basics on many topics, but there are things that bore me. The topics that are just a bit more nuanced and rely on opinion more than objective fact, like the benefits of one refrigerator part over another comparable one with slightly different benefits. Oh man, I almost fell asleep just typing out that sentence.
To say morality in itself is subjective, and I'm not saying that there aren't certain subjective components to it, but to say morality as a whole is subjective is actually making an objective comment, and it's actually leaving you at a vulnerable place. You cannot hold anybody accountable.
Sure. One can make objective assessments even if morality was entirely subjective. In your mind, if morality is subjective, then can I not say that the sky is blue if the wavelengths are between 450 and 495 nanometers? Sure, you could be colorblind and say, well, I see it as green, therefore it's just your opinion that the sky is blue. But we put a more precise definition than simple observation on whether something is a certain color or not. This is how you can explain color in an objective way. Morality is the same way. Once we define what morality is, like the color blue, we can show objectively whether something is moral or not, just like we can show if something is blue or not. In some definitions, maybe it is objectively subjective.
To say that morality is objective is that you have to confess to something that you have not seen proven through scientific means.
Fortunately, I don't say that morality is necessarily objective. Your mislabeling morality as objective is where this big hang-up with religion on morality comes from. This is the whole basis for the Euthyphro dilemma. In your mind, why is morality objective? Is it based on what your God thinks? Then it's subjective. It is just your God's opinion, right? If it is based on something outside your God, then your God is not necessary for morality. Some apologists try to get around this problem by saying, it's based on my God's nature. Okay then, if you base it on your God's nature, how did you determine what your God's nature is? How did you determine that your God's nature is the basis of morality? Why should I or anyone else care about what your God thinks or what their nature is, especially as a basis for morality? If I were to grant that morality is objective, then I could use the exact same tactic and say that it would be based on the facts of reality, something that we can actually test and prove through scientific means. You have nothing like that for your God. At best, you have a book written by men who make claims about your God. How can we determine anything at all about your God's nature like we can about the facts of reality?
Meaning you have to confess to a reality of some type of objective law. You have to confess to some type of reality of some type of objective lawgiver who has brought forth, constructed, manufactured, defined what is considered moral.
We did it, everyone! We finally got to the equivocation fallacy. I covered this exact argument in my Professor Dark Explains the Equivocation Fallacy video. If you aren't sure about the argument, check it out as I go over why it is a logical fallacy. To summarize briefly, moral law is descriptive, not prescriptive. It is a description of what morality is, not a proclamation of what morality should be.
We're made in the image of God, so to destroy another human being, we know that's wrong deep inside of us. But not everybody comes to that conclusion based upon their actions. But if morality is subjective, then who are you to point the finger at another person who may seek to destroy a group of people, a nation, or perhaps a desire to destroy the whole world? Yeah, morality is subjective, right?
That's all for his argument here. A pretty common misunderstanding of morality from a religious standpoint that on the surface feels strong, but with just a little bit of thinking and investigation, it is a pretty bad argument for the existence of not only a God, but any kind of objective morality. To summarize, once we agree on a goal, we make objective assessments of what is moral, immoral, or amoral. The goal can be subjective, but the evaluations are not. Any problem put forth with this idea is not solved in any way by a god or religion. By kicking the can down the road and just trying to attribute morality to a god just changes the subject of the goal. Whatever a god wants is just that god's opinion, thereby making it subjective. So what did you think? Do you think I objectively addressed his opinion, or do you think I missed the goal somewhere? Let me know in the comments and tell me where you would have handled it a little differently. Make sure to objectively demonstrate that there is a like button by clicking it and showing the world. If your subjective goal is to view more of this content, hit the subscribe button to stay updated on my content, thereby being objectively moral in my eyes. As always, keep learning.